We're launching our first ever seminar event, the Fine Homebuilding Summit. Join us October 2nd through the 4th in Southbridge, Massachusetts, as 12 of the building industry's most notable experts will offer more than 50 hours of presentations. Our goal? To explore advanced design principles, discover cutting-edge construction materials, and share trusted techniques. Space for this event is limited and expected to sell out fast. Don't wait. Visit finehomebuilding.com/summit to pre-register. That's finehomebuilding.com/summit.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting he do it himself. I'm just saying that that option probably isn't as much labor as I was thinking.
Just got to get a crowbar behind it.
Yeah, just
wrap a lot of electrical tape around the crowbar.
stand in a puddle on the basement floor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is editorial director Justin Fink. I'm sitting in for Patrick today, who is on the road, joined by associate editor. You're not an associate editor, are you?
No,
you're a deputy editor, Matt Milham.
It's me.
This script needs updating. And our digital brand manager, Mr. Rob Watzak.
Hey.
We also have Carrie man in the dials today, because I guess Jeff is out somewhere too, huh? Everybody's on the road. Happy Friday, everyone. If you have questions for us, send them to FHB Podcast at taunton.com. And make sure to visit finehomebuilding.com/podcasts for all of the show notes associated with this and every episode of the show. And to see all of the lovely links that Mr. Robert Watzak will have set up for you so that you can find out more about all the different topics we're talking about today.
That's right.
Does that cover everything?
Sounds good. And before we jump into anything, I just want to make sure we mention the summit. I think we still got another week or two. Is that right?
Yeah, we're getting close by the time this episode comes out.
Yeah.
We're up to a lot of attendees, but there's still a few seats left. So if you haven't made your plans yet, make them now, because it's going to fill up and you do not want to miss this event. I'm not saying that because I work here. I'm saying that, I would buy tickets to this for sure if I wasn't at this company.
Yeah, it's not an overstatement to say that this is a collection of some of the smartest and most experienced people in the industry when it comes to building high-performance homes.
Yeah, if you go ahead and buy a ticket, if you can tell me honestly after the seminar that you didn't learn anything that's going to be of value to you, then we'll give you your money back.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that's going to happen.
Either you're not a builder.
Yeah.
Or you should come be one of the presenters next year.
Yes, exactly. That's very true. We'll happily give you your money back and sign you up to be at the summit next year. We're also, if we can, let the cat out of the bag, we are in plans right now for a design summit, which we're tentatively aiming for sometime around May of 2020. It's going to be in a different location, and we are currently working on an agenda for the event, but that was always the kind of the dream, was that we would have the Builder Summit, and then 6 months or so later we would have a Design Summit, so we could really make sure we nail all the different aspects of our audience and really give them exactly what they're after.
Cool.
So that'll be exciting too.
Great.
Stay tuned for details. I know you guys are all rolling your eyes like, oh, more promo for another event. So we got a little bit of listener feedback to go through here. First one from Mason Lord, who is a friend of ours and owner of Hudson Valley Preservation in Kent, Connecticut, writes, in a recent podcast, you were chatting about things you've found during remodels. One time we found a time capsule in a column on a Greek Revival home in Dutchess County, New York. I remember my excitement as I crawled up about 6 feet into the column to retrieve the package nailed to the wooden disc that helped keep the staves of the 24-inch diameter columns in position. Carefully wrapped in newspaper and held together by twine, the letter gave the names of those who worked on the house and the date of construction as June 26th, 1845.
Sweet.
Yeah, and I believe Mason has a whole write-up of that whole encounter, and we can put that on our site, Rob.
Yeah, there was a news article. I'm not sure where it was featured. I'm sure we'll figure that out when we post it. I know a little bit of backstory on that house. It's up on.
You worked for HVP, right?
I did work for them. I didn't work on that project, but it was a big old Greek Revival house that overlooks the valley where Route 22, like just to the east of Millbrook, is in New York State.
I'm sure all the listeners know where that is.
Yeah, well, but it's this beautiful old house that for some reason, can't remember why, they actually had to rotate and move the house. And that's why they were moving the column. I mean, I think the foundation was failing.
That always seems to be the solution to problems. Customers come in, they want a new mantle. You're like, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to rotate the house.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we have that a little more in-depth on that story. And we also have some articles coming out in the coming issues from Mason's company.
Yep.
We just met on one of them today, as a matter of fact, and lots of good old house insights there. That's pretty much what these guys do, is work on really, really, really old houses.
Yep.
And there's a lot to know. They have to have a big bag of tricks. That's kind of the way I think of it.
Yeah, Mason and Dave, the two partners who own the company, got their start working specifically in historic preservation, and then eventually, with the knowledge they built there, transitioned into, responsibly remodeling older homes.
Right. It's very cool stuff. All right, more feedback. Doug from Florissant, Colorado. Am I saying that right, Matt?
Yep.
Florissant, Colorado?
I think so.
Writes, on episode 195, you discussed dealing with spray foam, adhesive, and tape after the fact. About 1 year after finishing our house, my string trimmer sent a rock into the thermopane glass in our back door. I ordered replacement glass and didn't expect any problems doing the install. When I started to remove the cracked glass, I discovered that it was secured in the door with VHB tape. It was much harder to remove than any 100-year-old glazing putty I've ever encountered. I used clear silicone to set the replacement. Some of the new products may be great when installed, but the idea is the houses should last many, many decades, and that means at some point in some time will require work. I could not agree more. I've actually dealt with the VHB adhesive before, and it is it is tenacious.
If you need to put two things together,
oh my God,
that's the stuff. And here's a tip: if you really want it to stick together, you heat this stuff up first before you put it on there.
Really?
I don't know why that helps, but
I've actually been so. At one point, we did a project, and I think this was in the magazine, or it was something peripheral, like a video. We needed to build some carriage doors, and we found out that the cheapest way to get dual pane insulated glass in the size we wanted for the doors, because we always like to have a little story associated with this, some way to scam the system and get something for a better price or a creative way. And so we went to Lowe's or Home Depot, one or the other, and ordered replacement glass for a standard back door. So I can't remember the dimensions, but it was like a real standard off the shelf kind of item for them, and so therefore it was really cheap. But it would come with the vinyl molding that you would need to set it into the door. So we had to strip off the vinyl and then this VHB tape, and it was
yeah.
like, I don't know why whatever. I don't know why it has to be that sticky for this situation, but
I think VHB stands for like very high bond or something like
yeah,
that.
I think
right?
it's just an acronym for very high bond.
Yeah.
super creative.
Yeah.
But yes, and we've gotten, by the way, other letters that echoed the same sentiment. People responded really strongly to that discussion topic of having to remodel houses with really sticky membranes and making it being easier to just remove all of the sheathing rather than try and peel away the grease, ice, and water shield on the roof. We actually have a question today about worrying about insulating in an area that you might want to then touch later, and worrying about the spray foam being in the way of an electrician. So this stuff does require some thought. And you mentioned preservation work, and in most cases, they don't consider spray foam appropriate for preservation because it's not reversible.
Yeah, there was one project I was almost going to work on for HVP actually, where they were considering lining the inside of the board sheathing and timber rafters with house wrap stapled in place,
right?
Spray foaming over that so that the foam wouldn't actually be bonding to the wood.
Did they do it? Did they go that route?
I never worked on the project, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I've often wondered about that. Just like one little layer of separation, what would that do to the insulation performance?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you got to think then all of a sudden now your staples. I mean, I guess it'll be pressure fit because the foam will expand to fill the space. but you're no longer bonding to the surfaces,
Right.
relying on staples.
I see that as a good thing.
Yeah.
But Matt doesn't believe in saving old things. So
I like saving old things. I like old things.
came out pretty strong last time we talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why should we save it just because it's old?
Well, yeah. I mean, just because it's old, it shouldn't necessarily be saved. But if it's nice and it's old,
I agree with you. I mean, and it's. I think there's something to be said for. You're more likely to take care of things if they're beautiful in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's old and beautiful, I think it's worth keeping it intact so that it can remain beautiful and old.
Yeah,
old and beautiful.
A lot of old-time carpenters have been working on houses for decades. We're like, oh, yeah, they don't build it like they used to. And it's like, well, they used to build crappy houses, too, so they just all fell down.
Right. What we're left is the really nice ones.
Yeah.
But it's also in the eye of the beholder. I mean, we're all going to be shaking our heads when somebody considers 2 1/4 clamshell casing to be, a real gem of a find in that 1950s ranch that nobody touched.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will always think it's gross, though. All right, you guys want to do questions?
Sure.
All right, Steve writes to us, we're in the process of remodeling our home and have run into several hacked floor joists, hacked in quotation marks, above the kitchen. The old bathroom was above the kitchen, and whoever ran piping really did a number on the floor joists. We ended up removing the subfloor and removing 9 joists, and they're rough cut 2x10 by 16. When sizing new joists to install, would it make more sense to install an LVL perpendicular to the room and then install new joists and use hangers to attach to the LVL, or just run the joist the entire span of the room? The room is 16'7", and the space above will be a bedroom. And Steve's wondering, would the LVL make more structural sense or not? In terms of structural sense or not, it's really, there's 14 different ways that you can get to the same place.
Yeah.
How do you want to get there? What are the other restrictions like headroom? And, you mentioned, I guess this is above the kitchen. When I initially read it, I thought it was below. Thinking, well, if it's a basement, you could just do a drop beam under there if you wanted to shrink up the size of those joists. But flush beam, what do you have? Oh, you got a lot of notes over there, Matt.
Yeah, well, I was just trying to think through what the issues may be.
Okay.
And if he's going to put it in LVL, then all of a sudden you have to have bearing all the way down to the foundation or footings in the basement, because those are going to be going basically to walls that there weren't joists going to before, there weren't loads going to before.
Correct.
So
you have to open up all those walls.
So you may have a lot more work to do than just throwing in an LVL.
Right.
And then the joists themselves, pretty much any lumber species 2x10, either structural select or number 1 will make that span.
Okay.
So you don't really have any issues there.
And I imagine you could also swap to I-joists and probably be even overkill.
Yeah.
There's always something to be said, though, for, and Steve doesn't mention this, but, that bounce factor. There's the difference between passing the span requirements and meeting code, and then does the floor noticeably deflect when you walk across the room?
Yeah, and since he's already starting with something that was structurally unsound, he probably doesn't really have an idea how much it would have bounced once those joists were intact.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But it's just a bedroom up there. So, it's only 30 PSF that he has to build to.
Yeah.
How do you think he's going to get these joists in?
That's a good question. I was curious how he got them out. What are the walls bearing on now? I don't know what, if he just kind of cut them short of the wall.
Yeah, he said we didn't get any pictures for this one, but he said he removed 9 of them.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I don't know. He said he removed the subfloor and the 9 joists.
Yeah. So I'm just curious where everything's
what were you standing on while you're working?
Well, I was going to say, I hope that if he removed the joist, he removed the subfloor too, because otherwise, how would that be hanging up there?
Right, and the ceiling finish for the kitchen.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
The subfloor is cantilevered off the tile in the floor above or the carpet. I don't know. I'm trying to wrap my head around walking into a room that has no mid-span bearing wall. So now you have to work with full-length joists.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to get a 16'7" joist into the house, into the kitchen, and then into place. And you could get away with the first several by coming in at an angle and knocking them straight. But when you get towards the end, that's going to get harder and harder.
Yeah.
You're talking about bearing them on top of the wall. I mean, would you?
Yeah, because you're going plate to plate.
Yeah, but he might be able to push it past the plate and then
you'd have to have a
pull it
hole into something else. I mean, you'd have to.
Well, I mean, I don't know if the joists originally were lapped,
Lapped on what, though?
I don't know if there's a center bearing wall.
You think there might be a bearing wall?
There might be a bearing wall in there.
Well, okay, we don't have that info.
No,
if there's a bearing wall, then I don't see any reason for why you'd put a beam in. Yeah, because, he's saying 16 foot. Oh no, room is 16'7".
Yeah, it makes me think there's something else in there for that to sit on. But
we ended up removing the subfloor and removing 9 joists, rough cut 2x10 by 16. I'm reading that as clear span.
Yeah, I don't know.
In that case, that's going to be a pain to get those joists in.
Just cut a hole in the side, cut through the sheathing.
But if you did have oftentimes it is easier to go through.
I mean, could you put almost like a ledger up there or a beam up there on top of the wall and just hang them on hangers?
A beam on top of the wall.
Well, I'm just saying, put something to bear.
Oh,
yeah, that'd be this.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Easy way to do it.
Yeah. So it would essentially act as like a rim header.
Yeah.
You'd have to put in a lot of hardware. Well, yeah, that would work.
I mean, it'd be easier than cutting holes in the wall and trying to wiggle stuff into place.
Not bad, Rob. Why didn't you think of that, Matt?
I wasn't thinking.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, really, we're only guessing here because we don't have pictures of what this looks like. So.
Well, that's what we do here, though.
Yeah.
The email probably had the information we needed. It probably got edited down or something.
Throw everything you can think of to the wall.
No, I think this was the whole question. We didn't cut this one down.
No.
Okay. Anything else we want to add there? Would you guys, the other interesting thing you have to, the subfloor's gone, is would you do this from above or below? I guess, you'd have to below.
I'd love to see some pictures because, I mean, we're just guessing here because honestly, you're thinking like, oh, you've got to jam things up and get them up tight and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be real tight. I mean, it does to fasten it and whatever. It only needs, what, 1.5 inches of bearing on each end? So.
Well, but what's keeping them from rolling?
I know. That's the problem. But you can probably jam something back behind it.
And you're going to have to toenail the ends into the rim, which is, I guess, fine.
Yeah, just put blocks between them
to keep them from rolling. Like framing a house from the inside of the floor instead of the outside. I don't know if I'm talking about it because I'm running through it in my head going, well, how the heck would I do this, regardless of what the room looks like. But anyway. All right, on to the next. Nick writes, anyone have a good feel for how much you can cut down a masonite bifold door? From the top, bottom, or both? I have a potential client that needs all the doors to his closets replaced and he spec'd, primed, and painted masonite units. The house has non-standard door openings, so some of the doors need to be cut down anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1 3/4 inch. The 1/2 inch is probably more doable than the 1 3/4, but thought someone might have firsthand knowledge by how much you can cut these things down.
Well, there's a couple of questions here. One is that is he concerned just about getting through the plug and having, I mean, that's no big deal. If you go past it, you just make a new one and fill it in. Or is he worried about like the looks, the proportions if it's like a paneled door, obviously if you cut too much off of one end, it's going to look awkward.
Well, so the concern with the hollow core door is that they only give you that only the perimeter of the door is actual wood.
Yeah.
And then everything in the middle is like honeycomb cardboard or something like that to keep it from compressing too much. But if you cut too much off of any one side, then you're into the hollow portion and you have to set in a new.
Yeah, and then oftentimes you can just chisel off the face of the old plug. If you go that far, you can just jam that back in there and reuse it. You don't have to cut a new one.
Right.
And in fact, I think we even have an article. Was it Rick Arnold or somebody did? Or Mike? And I think we've done that multiple times in the magazine.
I have done this work so many times. I hate bifold doors.
Yeah.
They're the worst. But you're absolutely right. My mind first goes to the proportions thing. And if you have to cut a huge chunk off of doors, I always like to take it off the top and the bottom, unless it's a really wide bottom, rail, so that because otherwise visually it just looks silly.
Yeah,
you need that bottom rail to be wider than the top. But I understand why people are tempted to not go that route because it might mean that you have to put in a new filler strip top and bottom.
Yeah. So,
and when you're cutting them down to size, by the way, I would recommend a really sharp blade or tape because this stuff tends to, the fibrous masonite material tends to
Feather.
chip a little bit and feather. Yeah, feather's a good word for it.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully any experienced carpenter knows that, like, if you cut from behind, you're going to pull the teeth into the face, so you're going to get less splintering that way. And then if you use, usually just good masking tape is enough.
Right.
Wrap the whole bottom of the door all the way around. Then plus, then it's a place where you can mark your cut without making a mess on the door too.
Right.
But he doesn't even mention whether or not it's a panel door, so that may be a moot point. But basically, it sounds like he's probably concerned about how deep he can cut into the door without compromising the door. But as we pointed out, I mean, if you really want to know and you don't want to get into it, you can probably just drill a little hole down there and just do some exploratory surgery, just to see how deep it is.
Yeah. Right. I feel like I think I've repaired more bifold doors than I've even installed. It seems like when I first started out in remodeling work, that was a very common request with customers. Often it was like, while you're here, can you look at these doors? And after years of looking at those, I just was finally like, does anybody make a set of bifold doors that doesn't fall apart after 10 years of using them?
So I just hate the look of closets with like sliding or bifold doors.
Yeah.
So like that was one of the first things that came off of the sliding door closet in my bedroom. And for the past 17 years, we've actually just had curtains on the door. We just bought some nice curtains.
Yeah, they were great.
Yeah.
I've also done a lot of jobs of replacing the crappy bifold doors with, using the existing opening and hanging doors. That's another route. It's also worth noting that you can order these custom cut to the size of your opening. You don't have to. I get that this seems like it's a little all over the map, and the client, I guess, already ordered all the things and primed and painted them. So a little bit stuck up a creek here, but bottom line, you can bottom line, you can trim it wherever you want to as long as it looks okay, and as long as you understand that. That's, I don't know, you're probably getting max
like an inch and a quarter,
maybe. I feel like it varies. And it, by the way, Masonite is a brand name, so we're not positive that that's what brand these actually are.
Meaning, like a hardboard.
Right. Yeah. Right. All right. Man, we're cruising.
Yeah.
You guys got to have more to say. We're on question 3 already.
Hey, I wasn't the one who picked all the simple. I had like 20 humongous questions in there before, and I got vetoed.
We had to cut one of Rob's questions out because we would still be reading it right now.
Yeah, it was almost 2 pages long.
You can blame Kylie for that. She made me put that one in
there. Look forward to that in a later episode of the Fine Homebuilding Podcast.
We'll make her cover that one.
Dave writes, I'm replacing my wooden bulkhead door using an FHB article below, and here's the link to it. We'll put it on the website. It's that particular project, I think I took that photo, was in Jamestown, Rhode Island. There's a really cool wooden bulkhead door that somebody put a lot of thought into the details of to shed water and everything. Anyway, Dave writes, my house is in Connecticut, and the bulkhead is on the south side of the house. The doors, trim, and siding are all going to be cedar. Originally, I was going to follow the article's suggestion and finish the new bulkhead with exterior acrylic paint, but now the wife wants me to use a weatherproof sealer of some kind so the pretty cedar isn't hidden. A penetrating oil finish sounds like an easy way to go, but I'm not crazy about having to redo it frequently. I have used spar varnish on a door threshold, which came out great, but it took multiple coats to really look good and wasn't cheap, even for a quart of varnish. Does anyone have a suggestion that falls somewhere between the two? Easy to apply, looks great, and will hold up for a decent amount of time. Dave, you built a wooden bulkhead door.
A magic bullet for that?
Yeah.
I don't think so. No, I mean...
You built a wooden bulkhead door, and now you don't want maintenance.
Yeah.
You're going to have maintenance.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I think wooden bulkhead doors are probably one of the highest maintenance like exterior trim items there are.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately. I mean, they're asked to do a lot to keep water out on a flat plane, to sit really close to the ground and not be affected by moisture too much.
Yep.
As I've gotten experience with different finishes over time, I always lean towards like a refreshable oil finish in a situation like this, just because you go with something like varnish and you're going to have to, it may last a little longer, but when it's done, you're going to have to strip it all off and sand it all down to unless you keep up with it.
Right. If you keep up with it, you don't have to do that. That's the key is, so there's a couple of things here. One, like Rob said, if you do a penetrating oil finish, tongue oil, I guess, would probably be the most traditional, simplest, cheapest approach. And then they have the kind of modified tongue oils that have some varnish mixed in, like Waterlocks is one of those, or Watco. Those, they penetrate in. So you're going, when you go to put on more coats, which you're going to have to do because it's not a high build finish. It kind of soaks in and seals the surface of the wood. So coming back next year, you're gonna have to wipe on another coat or two. The good thing there though is that it's super easy to put on. So it's not like, he says that he's not really crazy about the idea of having to redo it frequently, but it's really easy. Mm-hmm. It's like if you have a hardwood deck, you just kind of understand every year I have to put another coat of this on because that's what I signed up for. The varnish will get you more years if you do a good job with it. And as long as you do the maintenance, meaning you take care of, didn't we do a Q&A on when to refinish varnish, Matt? What was the answer
that was
to
for
that?
an exterior door.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. It was starting to fail after, 5 years or something like that?
I can't remember this, because we asked Peter Gedries what the threshold is of what can I touch up and what do I have to strip down? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, Rob's looking it up right now. But,
I can't recall.
one thing to be aware of with varnish is that it's really hard. It's a lot harder now to find really good varnish. There's been a lot of crappy varnishes that have hit the market that are labeled varnish, but they're really like varnish polyurethane, and they don't hold up very well. And if you go online and you search for different names, you can find tons of user reviews of people that will be happy to tell you all about how it was the worst varnish they've ever used and it didn't last at all. If you go to some place like, what is that? Is it Jamestown Distributors? Is that the name of the boat supply place? They have really excellent, basically anything that's made for boat building is probably still pretty legitimate. I
wonder if you think about it, it has sort of a lot of the same demands as a boat. You've got these crevices that water gets into. I wonder if an epoxy would even be appropriate.
Oh, I wonder. It wouldn't allow.
Honestly, it seems like the question here would be the answer here would be to go to look at some boat finishing literature because
right. It's like the topside deck on an old boat, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that is varnish.
Yeah.
And what I learned when working with Peter Gedries is that you need to start with 5-7 coats and really build it up. I think I use Helmsman spar varnish Helmsman I think is like the DIY brand. Maybe it was McCloskey's. That sounds right. But it was really hard to find. I had to order it because they don't carry it in a lot of stores. There's a lot of concerns about VOCs now, so some things are harder to find than others. They change the formulations and they're not as good. But if you can find McCloskey's, that's a really nice varnish. Thin it a bit and put on a lot of coats, and it takes time. But the idea being that you have a film finish now that is going to shed water before it even touches the wood, and then you can still scuff it up and recoat it. And I think one of the signs that Peter mentioned in that article, Matt, was that when it starts to look a little dull, you know that you need to give it some attention.
Yeah. He said that the spar varnishes are built to deal with the movement factors because they're a more flexible film.
Right.
And he has a whole maintenance schedule. If you just search for a finish fix for a varnished door, I'll put that in the links on the podcast.
But be very careful of assuming every spar varnish is the same because there's a lot of they're playing fast and loose with that term now.
So go to like West Marine or one of those other places that provides boat finishes. You'll get the best quality stuff.
The stuff you're going to get off the shelf at the store is probably not going to be worth buying.
I'd be a little concerned about the compatibility with cedar. I don't know. I haven't done a lot of finishing. But cedar, because it's got a lot of stuff in it, I don't know.
Technically speaking?
Technically, like what? Tannins and
Yes.
all kinds of other stuff
Yeah.
that kind of like, make it naturally rot resistant. And
Yep.
I don't know how well it takes various kinds of finishes. And Western Red Cedar does have like sort of like a finishing guide. And they recommend it various things depending on whether it's sort of plain flat or if it's rough sawn. And they do say either if it's, plain flat, your two options are like for their good options are either oil, and they say that'll last probably 1 or 2 years, or paint, which will last 10. So
Right.
this guy doesn't want to paint, but I mean, if you're going by their recommendations, expect to do this every year and use oil.
Well, it's also, didn't he say there's a lot of cedar on the house? Yeah, the doors, trim, and siding are all going to be cedar.
So the thing is, he hasn't built this yet. And
Yeah.
personally, if it were up to me, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but when I built the bulkhead at my house, I wanted to just be simple and cheap and maintenance free. And I actually built the doors are pressure treated frames, which I think a lot of people would do even if they're doing the cedar cladding on them. And I just used galvanized corrugated like roofing material.
Yeah.
But then when I was working on a historic house that had exactly this kind of wooden original bulkhead and it needed to be replaced, we were trying to figure out what's a good replacement. We didn't want to have to build some big heavy door. We wanted it to be light enough, easy enough for all the family members to lift. And it just happened that we were in the middle of putting a standing seam metal roof on their barn. And I was like, it's like basically a roof. I mean, a bulkhead door is like a little sloped roof. So I said, hey, I could build a nice lightweight pressure treated frame and just use some of the leftover pieces from the standing seam roof. And I just hemmed the edges so they weren't sharp, and actually made a really awesome, very like nice looking bulkhead door.
Wait, you positioned that like it was a sudden eureka moment to use the roof panel, but didn't you just say before that you used a roof panel on yours?
No, I mean it was mine. I had done years ago, and then when I was on this job site and they were asking for a solution, I was just kind of thinking, well, I've done this myself, and
gotcha.
we just happened to have some of that metal roofing on the job site. So
I got to put some of that metal roofing in on my house pretty soon here. We got winter coming. I got to get some of that standing seam on my porch and on the shed addition off the back of my garage.
It's on there now.
Roll roofing to buy me
lovely.
some time. Yeah, it's yeah.
but
Yeah.
one other weather resistant detail that I don't know if I've seen this on anyone else use this before, but you think about most of those bulkhead doors are inset doors with like some kind of almost casing around the two sides and the top, and that crevice always fills with junk, right? So I wanted to make the doors so that they were overlapping on all four sides really. And the way I did that is I built it up almost like you would flash a skylight in a roof, so that I used copper flashing all the way around the edges, so that basically it was almost like there was a gutter at the top, so that the door actually overhung the top, and that way you don't have any of those crevices where junk can sit.
And how do you deal with at the top where it gets closest to the house?
Well, so I basically brought the door down 4 inches from the wall and built up a curb so that there's copper flashing that comes down behind this clapboard siding on this sloped little portion, and then it goes up a couple of inches before it wraps the door casing, or the door jamb rather.
Right, and the door just rests and covers all of that.
Door covers all of that.
Right.
Yeah. So then it acts like a gutter, and it just drains all the garbage
That's pretty
off,
slick.
and it's nice and wide too. So it doesn't, even if stuff falls up there, you just blow it out.
Yeah. I think it's so cool to build a wooden bulkhead doors. I think it's like the ultimate wood challenge. I mean, not for boat builders or building boats out of wood, so they're really the ultimate. But I don't know. There's just such an interesting and creative engineering and water management challenge.
Yep.
And, wood can stay looking really good if you just put in some time and make sure you stay up on that finish. And as you're building it, make sure you're finishing the end grain of every piece that's going together, because you don't want to just be counting on that top coat to keep that water out at the end.
Yeah, and certainly think about any of the details that could potentially capture water or debris and eliminate those as much as possible.
Yeah, it's a really good point because you can spend a lot of time thinking about how to shed water, but then you should, once you get that figured out, then think, now what's going to happen when this thing that I'm using to shed water clogs?
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to happen on day 2 after installation.
Yeah. I build oversized gaps and almost like troughs or gutters in the gaps if you can.
Right. Like if you look at copper valleys on old houses, they're slightly wider at the bottom than at the top, so that if leaves and things land on them, they'll actually clear rather than clogging.
I've never seen that.
Yeah. If you look at the next one you see, if they're done well, it should be it might not even be hardly noticeable.
Yeah.
But if you start thinking about it logically, you're like, yeah, well, somebody figured that out the hard way.
It's like an upside down funnel, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. John writes, my 1970 Maryland house was very poorly insulated when we bought it 4 years ago. I've upgraded the insulation by blocking the unused fireplace, covering unused windows with plastic, sealing egregious attic penetrations, and by blowing in loose fiberglass full into the attic. This one spot in the basement is vexing me. We have a photo here. How do I safely insulate around my electrical panel? Will an electrician curse my name if I fill it with spray foam? Thanks for a great magazine and podcast. So this is the photo is a little odd to me because does it look like to you guys the electrical panel is half in the wall cavity, half out? Like it's not on the drywall.
Yeah, it's not completely flush mount. I don't know what.
It's
like somewhat like it's thicker than whatever the wall cavity is, and they just sort of butted up the drywall to the edges of it. You mean?
I don't know if it's that or if there's a gap behind it. Isn't that sort of what the question leads you to believe? Like there's sheathing or whatever, and then a space, and then the electrical panel. So there's wires running behind it or something.
Yeah, I mean, so we're looking at a picture here of a finished basement, drywall, and the panel is just sticking out of it, and there's a hole in the drywall, so you can see that there's an empty cavity in the wall between the foundation and the drywall around the...
Right, just the requisite holes right above the panel where somebody was remodeling wires.
Sure. I mean, so I think if he's worried about, one, pissing off electricians who might come and work on it later, or even just creating access for himself, and also potentially creating a fire hazard, putting foam right up against some of those wire connections or penetrations. I mean, I would almost treat it like you treat it when you're down south in termite country and you have to have that inspection gap around foundation insulation so that you can see that termites aren't getting up into your framing. I mean, it's a small area and drywall is easy to patch. Like my thought about drywall is that make as big a hole as you need because it doesn't take any more effort to patch a big hole than it does to patch a small hole.
Right.
You're still going to have to buy a 4x8 sheet.
Yeah. I mean, or one of those little overpriced 2-foot sheets. So
they're selling little short studs now at the home center. I've noticed that.
What the heck is that for?
2-foot sections.
Yeah, you can get like little short pieces of framing lumber.
Yeah. You know what I always wonder? The trim cutting section in the big box stores, they give you like a dull saw and like this metal bench that you're basically making the saw dull with. And then there's this huge bin full of the pieces that people leave behind. How do they make any money on that? Because you know that people are just destroying 16-foot pieces of trim and taking little chunks of them home with them.
That is precisely the reason I don't buy trim at that particular store in question, because I think it's just annoying to have to either buy 16-foot lengths of shoe molding, then try and put it on your roof rack and drive home, or to have to cut every piece with what essentially equates to a herring. I mean, it might as well be.
That's why you got to keep your cordless saw in the car. Just carry it out there, cut it.
It's funny because I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just that's one of the best uses of a cordless circ saw. Mm-hmm. Keep it in the truck. Anyway, we got way off topic.
Yeah. So I would say cut back the drywall as much as you want to around that panel, and maybe box in an area a little bit away from where all the wires are and insulate up to that point, and then just deal with the fact that you've got a tiny portion of your insulation that doesn't, of your foundation that doesn't have insulation in front of it.
I mean, another option here, if you don't mind having an electrician come in, is to just have them put the panel on the surface of the drywall. Mm-hmm. There's no reason you can't do that.
That's true. That sounds a little more expensive, though.
I think in my basement, and I put 2 inches of foam on all the walls of my basement. And before I did it, I came into the house, and the electrical panel was mounted on, there was like 2x attached to the foundation wall, and then deck boards or something between them, and then the panel was on those. So it gave me enough room that I could slide insulation behind it, and then just kind of air seal the deck boards, spray a little foam between all the gaps, and it provided some separation from the electrical panel and the foundation. Well, they already had separation. I just used the separation to insulate. So, it's possible here. There's no reason that I can think of that you couldn't have a piece of foam behind the electrical panel, between the concrete and the electrical panel. Is that jive with you guys?
Yeah, my idea was just do what he said, cut back the drywall as much as you need to, and then just cut and cobble some rigid foam in behind the wires and behind the panel if you can. But I suspect that the reason this thing is like sticking out from the wall a little bit is because they've probably used 2x3s against the foundation wall.
Oh, good call.
So that would be my guess. I don't know.
Okay.
But,
so that still leaves you some room to slide some foam behind it and seal it in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the key here is cut back the drywall, see what you're working with, and decide accordingly. I mean, if you're literally just moving it out a couple of inches, there's probably plenty of slack in those wires. So it's not like getting an electrician to come in and rewire stuff.
Well, yeah, you don't want to have somebody pull the meter first, right? Before you grab the electrical panel and start.
I'm not suggesting he do it himself. I'm just saying that option probably isn't as much labor as I was thinking.
Just got to get a crowbar behind it.
Yeah, just
wrap a lot of electrical tape around the crowbar.
Stand in a puddle on the basement floor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Another question. Ethan writes, just bought our first home and about to repaint the exterior. The house is almost 100 years old. The paint on the clapboard is peeling in certain areas down to bare wood, alligatoring on the windows, and chippy paint on the rafter tails. My previous approach on other projects was to scrape sand, apply a high build primer, and sand it smooth. I've been looking at peel bond primer, which on paper has the ability to bind old layers and self-level low spots. It dries clear, but it's also tintable and says to be applied 30 mils wet. I think I see the purpose from a production commercial side as a way to reduce prep work, but this is my house. So he's looking for any firsthand experience. Ethan says, I find it hard to believe it's going to spot level 8 layers of paint next to bare wood. Can it be sanded? What about a high build primer over the peel bond primer? And lastly, can it be sprayed? Have either of you guys used peel bond?
I haven't worked with it, no.
I have used it a bunch on my house. I'm trying to think. I've used the brand Peel Bond, and then I've used the Sherwin-Williams brand, which is like Bond RX or Prime Bond or something like that. It's it's like really goopy glue paint. That's what you have to think of it as. I don't think it's going to fill low spots and smooth things out. The areas that I've used it on have been painted areas that are not so loose that they're failing, but they're also not in fantastic shape, like the alligatoring areas where the paint is fairly stable, but it doesn't look all that great. A coat of Peel Bond primer over that is just a little bit of, it's like adding a layer of glue before you continue your work.
Yeah, and it's basically just softening the texture more than filling high and low spots, evening out high and low spots.
So it'll fill it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've heard, I know we did an article with, who's that painter down in the Carolinas that Patrick uses?
Hansel?
Hansel, yeah, Phil Hansel. He oftentimes, when he's doing a whole exterior repainting, they'll focus a lot of attention to detail on the first story because that's what you can walk up and see when you're going into the house or standing in the yard. So they'll scrape and strip and everything down there, and then often resort to something like the Peel Bond primer on the second floor, where they can save a little bit of money not like they're trying to be shady, but just putting your money where it counts the most.
Sure, that's smart. I mean, it's such a simple idea, and it makes so much sense because, just like when people say you got a 20-foot paint job on your car, it's like, yeah, it looks great from across the yard. Well, no one's ever going to be standing 2 feet away from the second floor walls.
Right. Oh, that's one of the hardest things when you're doing a lot of exterior work is sweating those little details that when you take 2 steps back, you can't even see anymore.
Yeah.
Like having to keep that in mind. So I guess my thoughts on it are that Peel Bond Primer is not like a miracle product that's going to save you from having to get rid of failed paint, but it's sort of a nice bridge product for those areas that are just kind of teetering on the edge of needing attention.
Do we know, is it have like some kind of special fillers in it, or is it just a heavy-bodied acrylic paint? Or?
I think it's just a heavy paint. I mean, it is clear. He says it comes clear, dries clear, but it's also tintable. I think I got 1 gallon of it clear and then started asking him to tint it because it's just, you can't even tell where you put it. I don't see the purpose of it being clear, honestly. Yeah. I guess maybe in their mind you're going to, like if you have a red painted house and the paint's starting to fail, you're going to put this clear coat on it and then just leave it. Maybe that is what they have in mind. I've always used it as part of a repainting. So it works. I have never tried to spray it, but I do believe you can spray it. I would imagine you're going to need an airless sprayer that has some get up and go to push this stuff through, though.
I did see another product called Peel Stop. I think they're both owned by Rust-Oleum. I don't really know what the differences are between the two, but my understanding from what little I read was that the Peel Bond that this guy's talking about is a little more flexible, I guess.
Okay.
And the Peel Stop, I don't know if that's more for like really damaged
Yeah, I think it's like
areas.
to basically stabilize.
I think so, yeah.
Old paint that's starting to come off.
Yeah, and the Peel Stop, they have like a triple thick formulation that similarly goes on, I think, up to 30 mils thick or whatever. And then...
What's a regular paint go on at? Give me a point of comparison. 30 mils is thick, but... listen, there's no escaping the scraping. That's kind of the mantra. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to do some elbow work. So, I mean, anything, alligatoring, sure. Peel Bond Primer, I would definitely give that a try. Chipping paint, anything that's loose and you can knock off with just hand tools, this is not going to save you.
Yeah, I mean, even on the Rust-Oleum website, they say it can help reduce the time spent on surface preparation. However, it is not a complete substitute for all surface preparation.
Right.
Yeah, I think in the information sheets, I think for both these things, they still say to sand down all the rough edges and everything.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's kind of like in auto body work. If you're working on something you've got some irregularities, they put a primer sealer on there. For a primer filler on there first, and you're still going to sand that. It just means that you won't have to apply and sand as many times.
Right. And often, isn't the primer filler a little softer somehow? Like it's I know that what is I'm forgetting the name of the product, but I mean I've seen it used in woodworking too. There's special primers that are meant to be kind of high build, easily sandable primers. So they're almost kind of turned to dust when you sand them, and it makes it easy to level out imperfections on cabinetry and things.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't used anything like that myself.
Surfacer filler or something like that. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. But listen, good sandpaper. You feather those edges out. You're never going to see those high and low spots. Well, I don't know, under seven coats of paint. That's a lot of paint. Please watch out for lead, too. Do a lead paint test and take care of yourself with a respirator and the right gear. And before you get into anything like that, you don't want to mess around with that.
Do you think he actually counted the 8 layers of paint?
I think so.
The house isn't even 100 years old, so that paint doesn't seem like it's lasting very long.
No.
Well,
you might have another problem.
Yeah.
Can you imagine having to detail all around those rafter tails?
Yeah, so we're thinking like a Craftsman bungalow or Foursquare when they had those exposed tails.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because it's also usually not the smoothest wood either to start with.
Yeah. And then you start to sand it, and you get the soft wood versus the early wood versus the late wood, and you get these little, fuzzy spots and low spots.
Yeah, maybe he needs to just take the Hansel approach, and you do a really nice job like near the entryways, and you kind of work you kind of like ease your way out to the corners.
Everybody will just assume that you did a great job up high too. Well, that's all the time we got for today. Thank you to Matt and Rob and Carrie for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Remember, we build this podcast on your questions, so FHB Podcast at taunton.com is where we want you to send topics and questions and problems. You can send photos, videos, or just text. And please be sure to like, comment, review, tell friends. It really helps spread the word about our podcast. So until next time, this is Justin saying keep craft alive and happy building.